Yes, it better be, because he's from a Christmas book I wrote, also set in Alabama, in Magnolia Springs, Alabama. I'm sure some of you know where that is. It's right outside of Fairhope. And the gentleman that produced and directed Fried Green Tomatoes bought it. And I sold him the rights only if he promised to film it in Alabama, and he said yes.
This is one you're going to have to explain to me. Fannie, were you a purple or a gold when you were at Alabama College? Must be Mount Alabama. Diddy Rush class in 1968.
Well, you know, I never went to Montebello. No, I didn't. A lot of people think I did. And you know why? I think a lot of people, because I'm from Alabama and she's from Alabama, have me mixed up with Holly Holiday. And I never went to Montebello. I went to the university. I am so glad that that question was asked, because I went to the University of Alabama Extension Center here in Birmingham. I got on the streetcar and went to college. How beautiful. But I went there, and I went there maybe a half a year. I didn't do well in that. But I would have been a purple, I suppose.
What was your biggest obstacle to getting started as a writer?
The biggest obstacle basically was the fact that I couldn't spell. and honestly, I'm the luckiest human being in the world, because the first job that professional job I got as a writer was on Candid Camera. And on Candid Camera, when you write for Candid Camera, you don't write it out. You sit in a room with a bunch of other people and you tell your ideas. So I was able to do that. And when I did comedy sketches on the Tonight Show or whatever, I would write them where I could read them and then memorize them. And I think it's so funny how somebody who's handicapped can sometimes turn around and just do you a world of good. I couldn't read, I'm nearsighted, I'm blind as a mouse. I could never read the teleprompter, so I always had to ad-lib. So fortunately, having to ad-lib and not follow a script on television, I did very well on Candid Camera because it was all spontaneous, and on Match Game there were no scripts, so that it all worked out very well. But I would say now, when you do they mean writing books, or do they mean
writing books?
Okay, well, of course, my biggest obstacle was, and we will get serious here because I didn't know, because we didn't know back then that I was dyslexic, and I couldn't spell at all, nor could I do math, and we didn't know what the problem was, and I didn't know my left from my right. Dyslexia affects everybody differently, and one of the first things that happened when I was a little girl, my mother took me, and I'm sure there's some people here that might remember this, Natalie LaVinge School of Tap and Dance it was up downtown over the drugstore. She had a dance school up there. And my mother, my poor mother, she wanted me to be a tap dancer. And I got in the class, and they say, I can remember it to this day, shuffle ball chain, turn right. And I couldn't figure out which was right, and I always was late. And I really was not messed up the chorus. And Natalie called my mother, and she said, we're going to have to ask her to leave because she can't do this. And that was one clue. The other clue was I couldn't ride a bicycle because of a balance thing. And then the the thing that really was shocking, or pretty shocking, was my name, as you, I'm sure I forget, but some people here that might not know that Fannie Flagg is not my real name. My real name is Patricia Neal, and I was known as Patsy, little Patsy Neal. And I went to St. Clement's Grammar School. Not because we were Catholic, but we lived down the block. And I was in about the 2nd or 3rd grade, and the sister called my mother, and she said, she was giving a report, and she said, well, Mrs. Neal, Pasty is a sweet little girl. Excuse me, sister, you know her name is Patsy. And the sister said, well, she spells it Pasty. And there you go. And that was a clue, but we didn't know what it was. Back then, you just thought you were slow, stupid, and I couldn't keep up. I couldn't do the math and spelling or anything like that. It's very, very difficult. And I think, again, as I said earlier, it's strange how things work out. Because I was so embarrassed about that, I started acting silly, you know? And started doing comedy and all that stuff. And it wasn't until many, many, many years later that I realized that I was dyslexic. It was from Match Game. It's funny, a teacher I've forgotten where she was. She wrote me a letter and she said, you know, something, you being dyslexic and all that. She said, I noticed the way you spell. She said, and I didn't know it, and then I got tested, but I was in my 30s at that time, so it was a little late. And so that's why I was so late in wanting to start to write a novel. I don't want to bore everybody, but I started wanting so much to write a novel, but I was scared to. And I moved to Santa Barbara, California in 1975, and there was a Santa Barbara's Writers Conference was going to be that week, and I noticed that Eudora Welty was going to be there. And I signed up for the entire 4 or 5 days of the conference because I didn't know that you could just go that night and hear her. So I signed up for the whole conference, and I went in and I looked around and I was convinced all of these people were serious novelists, they were professors of English, and I just felt out of my league, but I wanted so much to see Eudora Welty. And so everybody had little things they were writing, and so the man came out and he said, well, welcome to the Writers Conference and this, and he said, you know, every year we have a contest and a short story contest, and this year the one word we're going to use to throw out there is childhood. And I noticed that everybody took out a pencil and they wrote, and I took out my pencil and I wrote childhood. And he said it's due on Monday, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, if I don't do this, they're going to throw me out. So I didn't know what to do. So I ran down to a drugstore and I bought a little child's notebook. And I started writing this little story called Daisy Faye and the Miracle Man. And I wrote it as a little 11-year-old girl. And I wrote it in longhand. And I thought, well, if I make mistakes, if I can't spell it right, or I can't do my grammar right, I have yet to diagram a sentence. But I'll write it, and if they see that, they'll think I did it on purpose. Well, lo and behold, I won first prize. And Eudora Welty handed me the prize. I felt at once a fraud and elated at the same time. And an editor in New York read it and called me and said, I'd like to have a meeting with you. And I thought, oh, he might want me to write more of these little short stories. This little girl, I think I can do that and have a meeting with him. And I said, I'd love to talk to you. And he said, well, we love this little short story. And I said, I can do some more. And he said, no. He said, really what we want you to do is to write a novel based on this short story. And I said, how long is a novel? It's like 400 pages. And I sat, and as he was talking, I realized that I just burst into tears, and I said, I'm so sorry. I said, I have to tell you, I can't write a book. I said, he said, why not? I said, I can't spell. And he looked at me like I had lost my mind. And he said, well, why do you think we have copy editors? You don't have to spell. And so I said that from then on, I have been writing ever since. So that's amazing to me.